This is a Walkerianum, and it's a very big leaf. I don't think it will grow much bigger than that. It's been here about maybe 8 years. It's one of my oldest plants. So this is why I like them. They're all different.
It's different colours.
Yeah, different colours in the same plant.
And you put a bit of thought into the design and where you're going to put them all, or?
Yes, you have to.
Yeah.
These ones here, they like light, but they don't want any sun.
Okay.
So, you know, if they don't do well in one spot, I just shift them.
Yeah.
This is fairly special. There's not too many of them around. It's got the red veins with the green.
Yeah.
And I'm moving. Over here, there's a plain green one, but it's got exactly the same flower. And I don't know anyone else who's got one of those, but there probably is some around. These are all soft cane dendrobiums that only flower for about 3 or 4 weeks of the year, but they are quite spectacular.
When they flower, they really
Then they
flower, don't they?
They do. They really do. This here is something that's everybody chases, this particular thing.
Okay.
I just do forget the name of it, but I don't have to water it. I don't have to fertilise it. It just grows for me.
Looks after it.
So that's the sort of.
That's my kind of
Yeah.
plant.
Well, look, you can have that growing. But look what's flowery. My pencil orchid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
There's surprises everywhere.
There is, yeah. It's a native of the area and seems to really like this particular spot. So, yeah, that's a pencil orchid, but the round ones are a type of button orchid.
Oh,
There's
so there's 2 different orchids there?
probably three or 4.
Oh, right. They're all blending in
This
together.
is one.
Yes.
This is another one.
Okay.
That's another one.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's 3 plus the pencil.
Plus
the
the
pencil
well.
orchid. Yeah.
Is
Then
that
of
another
course-
little one there by itself? Or?
Yeah, these are goldens, which
Yeah.
aren't flowering at the minute.
They
Then
come-
another native up the top.
Okay.
This is a tropical, a red siraka. A pink siraka, this one.
Yep.
So,
A little bit of pink up there.
yeah, there's quite a lot when you actually look. You can see how many flowers that they've fallen on the ground. So, that's finished.
Beautiful.
This is a siraka. This one is a siraka. That's a brown ear. That one, it has been absolutely magnificent. It's just a little bit late. I'm smiling.
The reality is until you touch it and taste it.
Oh, no. It's just amazing. It is a piece of paradise in paradise.
Thank you very much.
So you put the leaves on, make,
Yeah, you just put a leaf on and just
Yeah.
mix the cement and pour it in a.
and you've made all the pavers are made on site.
Yeah, all the pavers are made. Yeah. These are probably my passion. I grow
Okay.
vandas because they're my favourite flowers.
It's your favourite.
Yeah. And this is my Vanderwalk. So I lost a lot last year, so I'm going to have to cover them when we had
Okay.
that really, really hot weather.
Yes.
See, the smaller leaf doesn't get affected by the
Doesn't
sun
affect it by the
as
sun.
much as the
But
others.
you're still
yeah.
you're talking about putting a cover over them.
For the really, really hot weather that we had last year.
A lily?
No, it's not a water lily.
No, but it's growing. Is
It's-
it growing in water?
Yeah, it's growing. It's all water. Yeah,
It's all water.
it's all water. Yeah. See that?
Wow. Water quality
Yeah.
treatments.
There it is, mate. There it
Water
is.
quality treatments.
There it is.
Nolan, that could work.
That's it. Yeah. And these are all the same as them. They're all vandas.
Okay, all Vandas.
Nearly all vandas. Yeah. Or the Vanda family.
Yeah. You've got them on poles or
Yeah.
star pickets,
Mm.
and you wrap.
Yeah.
and
Right.
that's what gives them the.
Yeah.
the
Well, then the roots actually grow into it.
Yeah. Okay.
So and they hang on.
Beautiful.
So some of the pipes are metal,
Yeah.
so I put that around because I thought the metal would get too hot and it would
Alright.
burn the roots. So they seem to like it. They grow on there quite well.
They seem to be growing.
See, they're all spiking again.
And you're repurposing old
Yeah,
things to make
exactly.
grow them on. It's
Yeah.
just beautiful.
Over here we've got a couple of different orchids growing side by side, and the colours seem to
Wow. It's
just,
That's absolutely amazing.
yeah, isn't it nice? And that one there is quite spectacular too.
Because they don't flower for long, do they?
No, but they flower probably 2 or 3 times a year.
Okay.
But they would stop out for 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
That particular spike.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a crucifix. They're nice colour.
Yeah,
There's,
beautiful
you know,
colour.
just
This one reminds me of coral.
yeah, it does. It is.
It really is good. Beautiful. Look at it.
So there's a couple of goldfish in here, but they like to be fed.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have a. Yeah.
Oh, you can see them.
Yeah, there's a
look.
lot of little fish,
Yeah.
but I'm left with 2 big goldfish
Okay.
in here.
Is that a water lily?
That's a water lily,
Yeah.
that one there.
Yeah.
And there's probably about 4 or 5 in there.
Okay.
So they're quite nice when they, when they come out. Yeah. There's Roaring Meg here. And then there's Shannon. And then there's a yellow one. All the same family. This particular one is the native of Fraser Island.
Okay.
And this one here is Shannon.
Okay.
The same family, but this one is actually crossed with
The yellow one.
the yellow one. So you've got, yeah,
So one's a native of Fraser.
one's a native of Fraser Island,
Okay. Yeah.
and then this one is crossed with those 2,
Okay.
and yeah,
And that's how it comes out.
that's how it comes
Beautiful.
out.
It's all
Yeah.
repurposed stuff. This old cane bins.
Oh yes, yes,
All
yes.
repurposing.
Oh, we recycle.
Absolutely.
Mostly.
Recycle,
Are you-
repurpose.
It's
Flame of the
it's
forest.
a flame of the forest, a Makuna. Have a look under here,
Okay.
and there's more. Yeah, I mean it's definitely past its
canopy,
best.
isn't it?
It's a canopy of red normally under here. This is the root of the Makuna, the red flame of the forest, and it's possibly, I think I planted about 8 or 9 years ago. So it's quite a prolific grower,
Yeah.
and for the tropics I like it.
Oh, it's beautiful and a beautiful space. Tranquil.
Yeah.
And you were just saying you attract a lot of birds and a
Oh,
lot of
you have a lot of
butterflies.
birds. I have a lot of butterflies in the garden as well, and a lot of dragonflies.
Oh, really?
I don't know why, but we like living here. It's close to town. I've got a nice house. I've got a nice garden.
You got
So
everything, mate.
I've got, I'm not complaining
And you
at
got
all.
the top gong
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah, true.
Fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live streaming, good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners, past, present and emerging. Do we have any apologies? I take that as a no. Councillors and staff, material personal interest, conflicts of interest including perceptions of COI. Please use this opportunity to make public any material personal interest and/or conflicts of interest, real or perceived, in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and/or comment on other councillors and/or staff interests in accordance with the Act and regulations. Councillors, do we have any conflicts of interest to declare? I'll take that as a no. We'll move on to the confirmation of the minutes. Would somebody like to confirm that the minutes of the 14th of May are a true and accurate record? Moved by Councillor Dewey, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? It's unanimous. The minutes of the special meeting, 20th of May. Somebody moved that they are a true and accurate record. Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Minutes of the local government meeting, 28th of May. Somebody moved that they are a true and accurate record. Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, any business arising from those 3 sets of minutes? I have one item I'd like to raise through the CEO. On page 37, in relation to the organisational restructure, Mr CEO, could you give us an update about the mandatory consultation process that needed to take place with the unions and the employees as per the certified agreement.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And with your permission, the mandatory consultation period ended yesterday at 4:30. There were over 20 submissions received. Staff from People and Culture are analysing those submissions as we speak, and the executive management team is scheduled to meet at 2:30 this afternoon to further discuss the matters that were raised in those submissions. There'll be further reporting to Council after that analysis is done.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillors, any questions of the CEO on that matter, or anything else in relation to the restructure? If not, we'll move on to item 3, community and culture. And the first item of business is 3.1, Libraries and Customer Service Report, and that'll be delivered by Joyce Williams. Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you and good morning.
Morning.
As you know, the libraries are reopened for business, or limited business I should say, on Monday the 18th of May, with the exception of Mission Beach Library. Mission Beach was still undergoing a couple of renovations there, the installation of an access ramp and some new doors, but they have now opened again as well. The Cardwell Museum does remain closed, even though the visitor centre down there has opened on a limited capacity. We did open with a limit of 10 people at a time in the library, but that has now increased to 20, and our members have really only been able to return books, or borrow items, I should say. We've had up until the other day, we had no computers or any seating available. Our public computers are now available again on a very limited basis, so only every second one, and we've sort of put a limit of 30 minutes per person on that. I guess the main thing we've noticed is that our door count since we reopened is trending down by about 55%, and compared to the last full month of operation in February. And to me, this demonstrates the fact that our libraries these days are used for many different things. It's not just about the lending of items. They're a community hub, and they're widely used by a wide variety of people in the community for very different reasons. So if we've got no programs happening, we had no computers to start with, their quiet areas for reading and study are not available. So that really disadvantages quite a few people in our community. Even the toilets not being open has been quite an inconvenience for a lot of people. So it just does demonstrate that libraries are not just libraries, they are a real community hub. On another note, we've had solar panels installed at the Tully and Cardwell libraries, and our Mission Beach Library donated some disused and worn books to the Rainforest School, which has been very welcomed by them, and they responded with a very nice thank you post on Facebook. So during the closure period, the library team produced and uploaded 27 videos to Facebook, so they're story times, rhyme times, craft sessions, STEM programs. And from that, we've had a total of 24,242 unique views on those posts. That's been just an amazing response to them. On the 27th of May, we celebrated the National Simultaneous Storytime, which is the reading of the same book across Australia by schools, libraries, a wide variety of people, and they always read it at the same time. So there was a reported 1.3 million participants to this year, and we produced a special online story time to that, and I can highly recommend Whitney and Brittany Chicken Divas as great reading material if you're looking for something to read. That particular post received 765 unique views in 24 hours. Also during the closure period, our library's Facebook page followers increased by 16%, and organic page likes increased by 10%. Mission Beach Library's been successful in 2 grant applications. The first is a First Five Forever, our premier literary program, for a total of $2,988. $4,980, and that will be used to create a nice children-friendly, comfortable and ambient space in the new meeting room once it's completed at Mission Beach Library. And the second grant was for $2,988, which is a Strategic Priorities Micro Grant. These all come from the State Library, and that's to create a create a makerspace at the Mission Beach Library. And this will be extending our current STEM program with the robotics, and it's about buying more equipment around that makerspace for our after-school program. And that's the end of the library, so I'm now going to hand over to Ms Brennan for the customer service report. Are you doing?
Yeah, question
Yes.
from
No,
Councillor
not a question,
Cherry.
just a comment and a congratulations on all the library team. I was in at Mission Beach Library the other day. It looks great. And I learnt myself that it's more than just borrowing books. So I just take my hat off to you and your team for the videos and the connection with Facebook. I think you've all done a wonderful job. So thank you on behalf of the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms Williams, councillors? If not, hand over to Ms Brennan. Thanks, Joyce.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, councillors.
Good morning.
As you may know, we are recruiting for a senior customer service officer. So in lieu of that person, I thought I'd present the customer service, show you my mug instead. So I'll give you a bit of data regarding our reopening. So we reopened to the public on Monday the 18th. We had 10 people at a time as well. We had social distancing. We've had closures in some of our customer service centres just for lunch. But the foot traffic has been steady but slow, I think is a nice way of wrapping that one up. We've got, obviously our officers are still working on a lot of things behind the scenes, and as we go into the data you'll see some of the graphs there that actually show what we were able to achieve when there's less customers than there are normally, but the customers are picking up. So we're taking a door count now. We're signing in everybody as part of COVID safe measures, as their name and address. We take their contact details now, and they are increasing as we more and more get out there and let them know that we're open and that the services are returning. As far as customer requests go, there's been a significant spike. We're closing more, of course, because everybody within the organisation has a wee bit more time on their hands to look at the customer requests. But we're raising a significant amount more, which you could also put down to people being at home and aware that they could be raising their customer requests. Very certain segments like roads, I think I've described in here, roads have come down, which we've put down to the fact that people aren't driving on the roads as much, so they're therefore not raising customer requests as much. But other customer requests, wheelie bins, for example, have gone through the roof, barking dogs, through the roof. An important point down the bottom of my summary on page 2, during May there's a shortage of parts necessary. So there's quite a few customer requests that when we've actually delved into the customer request, it involves parts from other parts, asset maintenance and other parts of the business that we actually didn't have due to COVID shortages. So transport and distribution shortages. So that's actually inadvertently affected our customer requests. Onto the next page, top 5 requests, they remain the same. Obviously the numbers within those top 5 are differing slightly, but the top 5 requests is still the top 5 requests. There's the roads and drainage requests were led by road hazards such as potholes because of the recent heavy rainfall. So you can definitely see there's an enormous, what's going on out there is immediately obvious inside. If you never went outside and saw the rain, you would know from listening to the phones. There's some data there. I won't go through unless you want me to. Customer engagement by phone has remained steady. The abandoned call rate is incredibly low. So we normally sit at around 4 or 3%. That means if you call customer service and you listen to the introduction and you stay on the line, so you know the kids aren't screaming in the background or the pot doesn't start boiling over and you have to hang up the phone, so you actually stay on the line, so we figure that you actually want to speak to us. That rate normally sits around 4. It spikes incredibly when someone's ill. It goes up to about 9. It's that instant. but we've been sitting at about 0.2. We've had 1%. So that's kind of, that gives you a bit of an indication that if we're able to answer the phones, the abandoned call rate drops, through, if you're going to use that as a statistic. That's pretty much what I'd like to run through on the report. Is there any questions, or does that raise anything for anybody?
Councillors, any questions for Ms Brennan? If not, thank you very much, Ms Brennan.
Thank you.
We now move on to item 3.2, Community Assistance Grant Scheme, and I'll ask our Community Development Officer, Kath Hanson, to present her report. Welcome, Kath.
Thanks. Okay. This report summarises the...
Something's happened.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but there's some issue.
Oh, remove to receive the report. Yeah, okay. Would somebody move to receive that report? Moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Sands. Over to you, Kath.
Okay. This report summarises the recommendations of the Cassowary Coast Regional Council Grants Review Panel for the expenditure of $39,200 for the approval of 15 applications that came through. Basically, we received 19 applications, 15 were approved. The responses is always overwhelming. We always have more demand than supply. And as a result of Council's contribution of $39,200 equity into community, there's community input of just under $200,000 that further support community-driven activities and projects. So that's about it. Was there any
questions for Ms Hanson, councillors, in relation to that report? Happy to move, Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 3.3, the Alerus Community Support Recreation Association report.
Okay.
Kath.
Yeah, so at the same assessment meeting that we had the community grants, there was a request from the Alerus Community Sport and Recreation community for financial support for their 2020 celebrations of the Alerus Township. There was a committee with both community and council staff working on celebrations since 2019. There was support for a project for their cenotaph being a soldier town, soldier settlement town. They applied for funding and didn't get the full amount, so the request was to complete further stages of the cenotaph. And as part of that project, they actually have confirmation of the Honourable Paul de Jersey, the Governor of Queensland, will be attending the launch in August. So at the assessment meeting in May, the committee also approved a contribution to the Alerus Community Sport and Recreation group of $5,500. So it's basically a significant celebration for our community.
Any questions, councillors, for Ms Hanson on that report? Move Councillor Farinelli, seconded Councillor Barnes. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. And we move on to item 3.4, the Community Services Sponsorship Contributions. Kath.
Okay, so this report further summarises the recommendations of the Grants Review Panel for the expenditure of $11,000. That's 3 contributions to the 3 Coast Guard organisations within the Cassowary Coast, and that's coming from the Community Sponsorship Contributions category from our Community Assistance Grants. Essentially, the Coast Guards represent essential services in the context that the importance of water sport and recreation fishing to a coastal community. So with the $11,000 expenditure, that actually completes our expenditure or exhausts our expenditure with the Community Assistance Scheme. Yeah.
Just to further add to that, it was really great that the staff made us aware of this funding that was sitting there. The Coast Guard had made a submission in for the community grants, but it didn't fall within the guidelines. Was my memory of
That's
that.
correct.
So basically, the rest of the committee and I acknowledged the contribution that the Coast Guards make to our community and our region. They're doing it tough just like everybody else. So we felt it was definitely worthwhile putting some money in that direction through this allocation. So yeah, thank you again to the staff for making us aware of this funding there and that we were able to help in just a little way.
Yeah, good result.
Thank you for that acknowledgement, Councillor Farinelli. Any further comments or questions for Ms Hanson? Moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Kath. We now move on to item 4.1, the Tourism Monthly Report, and Mr Blanchett, our Tourism Coordinator, will present. Morning, Richard.
Morning, Mr Mayor, councillors. Here we go. Welcome to the Tourism Report for May. There's a few things I'll cover. Most of May has been focused on support and recovery for our businesses through COVID. So there is some statistics in the report there, but just in a nutshell, it's an unprecedented time for tourism. I think we're all hearing it in the media every morning, the concerning situation for tourism businesses across many sectors: accommodation, hospitality and tour operators. And there are many levels of challenges. From us right now, from the council and in the support calls, they're telling us they need customers and they need support. So it can be narrowed down to those two items. We have spoken to many of them, and recently with the Premier's announcement on Sunday 31st of May that Queensland would open, we've seen a bit of positive impact on the industry overnight. So literally it turned the switch on. We're getting reports of accommodation bookings from the Monday morning, the very next morning. So this helps the focus move clearly into recovery. In the recovery area, we're collaborating, as you'll see in the report, well with Tropical Coast Tourism, and they have been playing a role with Council right through while we present our messaging through the LDMG report system. We've had the benefit of having an LTO that once a week has been reporting the tourism issues through the Tourism Industry Network at a regional level, which basically goes straight through to the Minister. A subject that we've recently launched to assist recovery is the 102 things to do. Just the collateral that visually looks like that, I think we're all familiar with. The media team did an effective release of that. There were immediate network grabs for interviews with council, and that is basically a product to stimulate one, awareness, have our many things to do, many more than 102, but you can only get so many things on one piece of paper, and to stimulate awareness and obviously trying to convert that awareness into business. And this is where the collaboration of TCT is very important. They have in recovery utilised 102 things to do in their campaign, which has just started this month. There'll be a heavy feature of our region in a magazine that launches on Monday, Tropic Now. And TCT have put a campaign, there's 6 pages on Cassowary Coast, and 102 things to do will feature in that. That magazine will be in the markets of Cairns and Townsville. It's supported by a radio campaign they've put together, and TCT will be producing 100 posters of these to distribute in those cities as well, to reinforce the focus on the Cassowary Coast for recovery. With the COVID situation, the visitor centres only opened early in June, so there's no stats from the visitor centres in this report this month. We would have had visitation. We noticed while the doors were closed, we still had travellers in transit, and they would go to the well-known accredited visitor information centres to access information. while the doors were closed, they could still reach that through Wi-Fi and through the messaging we had on the external areas of the building for support information, COVID safety information and the like. The focus now that we're recovering and the information centres did open last week is basically a welcome. So again, aligning with the whole recovery, the 102 things to do. A very warm welcome and thank you for coming to our region now that the gates are open, so to speak. Just to touch on events, I just made a note in there that the Targa event organisers are still continuing with their organising plans for that event. That's likely to be dependent on the state borders opening, but at this stage they're continuing to work forward optimistically. The Cardboard mountain bike project is progressing well as well. We're just at the final stages of working through the workings with the traditional owners on that project. And just on the statistics for the recovery, I just wanted to highlight that with the movement into Queensland opening and the recovery, on the Monday after the Premier's announcement, we rang basically every hospitality accommodation and tour operator to basically get a data list of who's open today, ready for business. At that stage, it was close to 200. By the end of June, we know that 6 to 10 other operators will be open. So before the end of the month, we'll have visitors will be able to get a water taxi to Dunk Island. We'll be able to return to Paranella Park. We'll be able to do a cruise on the Johnston River with snapping tours. So these things are opening day by day. And just acknowledging our tour operators and businesses making these tough calls to reopen. On those stats, at the start of doing the ring around, we had a collection of 551 people in accommodation in the Cassowary coast. And I'll just sort of give you a perspective on that. Based on Tourism Research Australia data, those people are spending $121 a night in our region. So that one night, literally the next day, the accommodation was empty. That represented $67,000 that night. Or over the week, that's nearly $500,000, $469,000. So while 551 doesn't look a big number, the economic impact has been fairly serious for our businesses. So that's a quick summary of the report, Mr Mayor and Chair.
Thank you, Mr Blanchett. Any questions for the officer?
Through the Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Millwood.
I just wanted to ask Richard, where is that magazine going to be available?
Sure, through the Chair. Tropic Now magazine is heavily distributed in Cairns. For the first time, it'll be distributed in the Townsville market. So that Townsville haven't seen it yet, so it'll have like a honeymoon audience. And we're accessing copies for here. The specific outlets, I'm not sure, but it is a well-known magazine, particularly in the Cairns market.
Yeah, Rich. Through you, Mr Mayor. You could add one more to that 102, Richard. Yesterday, they've got on today's CCIN news, you'll see on front page, it's Jessie, Nessie, N-E-S-S-I-E, Nessie the Cardwell Croc, who put a performance on yesterday. There's a 30-second clip for those who wish to go on the CCIN Facebook page. It's also got its own Instagram page. It's well worthwhile a look this afternoon. And so if you also have a look at the CCIN in today's thing, we are getting a new newspaper. Seeing the Advocate's closing and the Herbert River Express is closing, we're going to get a newspaper called the Wet Tropic Times, and it'll be covering an area from Rolling Stone to Babinda, which will be good for our tourism and also our council news, etc., and our businesses. And that'll be coming online towards the end of the month. It'll be a hard copy, so everyone should be pretty happy. But yeah, anybody who can spare a bit of time this afternoon, and also the tourists, get hold of the CCIN and have a look at Nessie. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Chewy.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. I'm just regarding the 100 things to do. The comms team have encouraged us councillors, and I'm encouraging the public to snap a photo if you're at one of those 102 things and perhaps share it with council, just to tag it in some way, just as a bit of a publicity thing. I mean, just thought of that now, but I think it would be something we could pursue, perhaps.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you, councillor, and councillor Barnes. Maybe that's our 103rd thing to do, to capture a sight of Nessie the croc down in Kabul. Councillor Chewy, yeah, that's fantastic. This is how everyone can participate in. Tourism's about collaboration, and tourists don't see any boundaries between councils or between towns. So if we can highlight and tag, there are some relative tourism tags that I'll share with the council marketing team to share with councillors. That will actually, when you tag them, they're the official tags to take it through TCT social media, TTNQ social media, Tourism Queensland social media. So I'll provide those to the marketing team, councillor.
Thank you, Mr Blanchett. I'll just take this opportunity to compliment the tourism and comms sector on the 102 things to do in Cassowary Coast. Some of the feedback I've had from neighbouring shires has been that where else in the world could you have the rainforest meet the reef, do an adventure skydive and land on the beach and see a cassowary, nature-based tourism. So we've got the perfect package in terms of adventure and nature-based tourism, and a lot of other shires are envious of that, and I think it's a great campaign. As you said, the media were keen to grab a hold of it and do interviews, and it's gone down extremely well. So congratulations.
Great. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and it's an important time, and it's a highly competitive, everyone's after Cairns and Townsville tourists right now, so it's really, thank you for the acknowledgement, and credit the marketing team for getting it out there.
Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Blanchett mentioned a few times during his presentation this morning about the borders being closed and how reliant we are on these border openings. I was very encouraged this morning. I noticed that the Prime Minister is encouraging premiers to look at opening these borders, and also the development of the tourism bubble. The original agreement, I believe, with New Zealand looks like another 4 South Pacific countries initially straight up trying to include themselves in the bubble. Of course, they'll be looking for tourism in their direction, but I think it'll flow both ways. So it's very encouraging to see, and I think it's a great space that we may be opening these borders a little bit earlier. Thanks, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Councillor Millwood.
And I think we should also put out there, Richard, that people need to go on TripAdvisor when they go to these 102 destinations and make sure they put a positive comment on there.
Councillor Farinelli.
Through you, Mr Mayor, your job just became so much more important than it's ever been before, because we really need to get this out there, what we have to offer, and I think the 102 things is a great initiative, and I'm looking forward to really working closely with you as well in the coming times and making sure our region is ready to go, and we've definitely started that. I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Move the officer's report, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Blanchett. We move on to Governance, Environment and Finance, and item 5.1, the schedule of fees and charges, and Ms Bradley will present this report.
Good morning, councillors.
Morning.
As part of Council's budget process, our schedule of fees and charges is reviewed by Council staff and then discussed with councillors. So whilst Council's main revenue source is our general rates and utility charges, our fees and charges revenue generates approximately $2.5 million worth of revenue, which is about 3% of our operating revenue. So in light of COVID-19, Council is continuing to determine ways in which it can support the community in addition to what has been adopted to date. Council is putting together a financial relief package to assist ratepayers and residents who are directly impacted financially by COVID-19, targeting specific fees and charges within the proposed schedule of fees and charges attached, as well as rates and utility charges. This package will be adopted with the 2021 budget on the 7th of July, prior to these fees and charges becoming due. This is in addition to the COVID-19 financial hardship policy adopted by Council in May. So Council officers have reviewed the fees and charges for 2020-21 financial year. There are 839 fees and charges in total, with 463 remaining unchanged or reduced. A total of 51 fees have been discontinued. 53 new fees have also been added into the schedule. Where it's considered appropriate, an increase in the order of 2%, which is our local government council cost index for the December quarter, has been implemented against those fees. Comments relating to some of the more significant changes include in the library space. So fees for interlibrary loan freight charges have been removed to strengthen the alliance between Cassowary Coast Council and other council libraries within the North Queensland area, as well as not-for-profit organisations and charitable organisations still being entitled to 50% reduction in the hire fee, which may be discounted as an in-kind support in accordance with Council's policies and procedures. Secondly, mooring fees. So after a benchmarking exercise was undertaken, mooring fees at the Johnston River Boat Harbour have increased by 25% to be comparable with other moorings within our region and neighbouring council regions. These charges will be reviewed again upon the completion of the works at Clump Point. Cemetery fees relating to adult reservation, interment and plaque and headstone placement have been benchmarked also across neighbouring councils within our region. As a result, these fees have increased by 26%, which is still under the benchmark rate. The other fees in this area have remained either unchanged or have increased in line with the council cost index. In environmental services, a new fee has been introduced for Category 11 temporary food businesses, added on to CCRC food business licence at no charge in order to capture the data around that service. Under animal management, an additional pensioner discount has been introduced for dog registrations. So this allows the first D-sex dog registration for a pensioner to now be free of charge, with a small cost for any additional dog owned. For impounded animals, there's no charge for the initial release to assist residents in retrieving their animal if they've run away, and the fees for the second and third and subsequent releases have been increased substantially. Regulated, which is dangerous and menacing and restricted dogs, registrations have increased by 11%. And the category of rural dogs has been removed, and all dogs that are not working dogs, as per the definition, will be considered in line with the entire de-sexed or pensioner-related fees, in line with legislation. Under prescribed activities, events are now assessed by the number of people attending, and there is no longer a specific fee for circuses, as they'll be assessed under the same guidelines as all temporary entertainment events. Roadside vendors have been redefined according to goods being sold and by location, and 2 new fees have been introduced for the alteration or improvement on local government controlled area and roads set at $150. New fees have also been introduced for application and permit renewals for the installation of portable advertising devices and an establishment. A new fee has been introduced for marriage ceremonies, which now have a charge of $100 per site to prevent multiple sites being booked for the one event and enable a register to be maintained. Under local laws, an administration fee of $60 has been introduced for the removal of signs in non-compliant places. In waste disposal, so the state government waste levy increase has been deferred for 6 months in light of COVID-19. Therefore, the levy of $75 plus GST per tonne will remain in place until December 2020 and will increase effective 1st of January 2021 to $80 plus GST per tonne. Fees that attract the state government waste levy have been adjusted, and there are 7 applicable fees that will be separately listed that will be impacted by that 1st of January change. In addition to the waste levy changes, the base fees have increased by council cost index. Charges for commercial separated cardboard have increased with domestic quantities of green waste, recyclable material and domestic waste continuing to be free of charge for our community. In water and sewerage, there have been minimal increases, and the increases include the fee, aside from the increase for the fee to search council records for location maps of water and sewerage mains, as well as meter testings, which are both increased in line with cost of providing those services. Council has discontinued the maximum daily landing fees for itinerant aircraft and has made minor increases to other fees in relation to CCI as well as rounding. Tully Airfield Sporting Group seasonal fees have been reduced in line with other sporting group fees, and a new fee has been introduced for Curramine Beach Caravan Park, which is for self-contained RV camping, set at $21 in line with other campgrounds. Hire of the new pavilion at the Tully Showgrounds has been increased to be comparable to charges at the Innisfail Showgrounds, and not-for-profit and charitable organisations are also only have to pay 50% of the hire fee, which may be discounted further in line with Council's policies for in-kind support. Under swimming pools, fees for the Mission Beach Aquatic Centre have been included, dependent on the structure of operations of the facility after a successful manager has been appointed, and are in line with other pools within the region. Under planning services, no increases have been applied against the majority of those planning fees, including developer contributions. This decision was made in order to encourage growth within our region and stimulate our local economy. In light of COVID-19, these fees will assist the development of Cassowary Coast by minimising the cost of development applications. The feed for roadside stalls was separated into two categories in the 1920 financial year, one for stalls greater than 10 square metres at $1,225, and a fee for stalls under that threshold at $875. In this proposed schedule, these two fees have now been combined to not distinguish between the sizes, to increase the number of market stalls within our region, and will now be charged at a lower cost of $650 per year. Any type of pre-lodgement inquiry or advice requested by any member of the public has been clearly identified as a free service in our fees and charges to ensure that those who are preparing an application for lodgement provide the application in a very high standard. Family daycare, the educator fee per child per hour has increased from $1.70 to $1.90 to cover costs associated with the service, which operates under a user-pays system. So the proposed fees and charges do not take into consideration assistance that may be provided as part of Council's financial relief package that will be adopted as part of the 2020-21 budget process on the 7th of July. With the above charges noted, it's recommended that Council adopt this schedule for 2020-2021 fees and charges, which will be effective 1st of July 2020.
Thank you, Lee. A very comprehensive report, and I guess it highlights the environment we're all operating in at the moment, where people are struggling, and there's a second financial hardship package being mooted here. So along with our core business and essential services, this council is clearly showing empathy for our community, and I applaud the staff for the processes they've followed thus far. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Barnes.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. When it comes to swimming pools there, we've got leasees for most of them, bar one, but if we do get a leasee for this last one, have they got the right to charge their own fees, or is it up to council?
Yeah, I'll just pass. Oh, sorry.
Through the chair, Mr. Deputy Mayor, the fees are set by the lessee in consultation with council. So they need our approval to set their fees, but they are set by the lessee themselves. We wouldn't be approving fees which are inconsistent with or certainly not fees that are inconsistently higher than the pools that are the other pools that are in the region.
Councillor Mains.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably just a more pedantic thing than anything else. On note 12, we talk about the 50% fee for not-for-profits and charities, and then we also go towards, and I note Leah used the word donated or discounted rather than the word waived. I don't know if it's appropriate to actually change the typo within a report, but I notice over the past few years we've developed the policies where we don't waive those sort of fees. We look at discounting or donating them on a case-by-case basis.
Over to you, Mr CEO.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chairman. Through you, yeah, that can be corrected, Councillor Baines. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr Chair.
Councillor Baines. Any further questions for the officer in relation to the fees and charges schedule? If not, I'll ask for somebody to move. Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thanks,
Bradley.
Leah. Great shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
Item 5.2, delegations. Council to the CEO, and Ms Johnson will deliver this report. Oh, sorry, Ms Kerr will deliver this report. I'm looking at the agenda.
That's okay. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Through the Chair, as per Section 257 of the Local Government Act, Council is required to undertake an annual review of its delegations to the CEO. Governance has conducted this review for this year. The last review was done in April 2019. As you can see from the attachment, the Delegations Register was first created 10 years ago in June 2010. It's an extensive document that we update constantly as legislation is amended or introduced or repealed. Councils have certain duties which they must perform and certain powers which they may exercise pursuant to the Local Government Act. In most cases, the relevant acts grant these obligations and powers directly to Council, and it is not practical or efficient for Council as a body of elected members to perform the activities that are required in the day-to-day administration of Council's roles and functions. This report seeks Council's resolution to ensure that the delegations under the varying legislation, as outlined in the appendix, is reviewed and adopted for the current year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Kerr. Any questions, councillors, for the officer? If not, I'll ask somebody to move the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Kerr. We'll move on to item 5.3, formal access agreement, and over to the CEO who will present this report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chairman. Mr Chairman, this report deals with a proposition put forward by the Parliamentary Speaker, the Honourable Curtis Pitt, and excuse me, and concerns access to parliamentary precinct for mayor and councillors and pre-approved support staff, and for access to be provided to members of parliament to certain council facilities. It's little more, Mr Chairman, than a formalisation of informal agreements that have been in place for some years now, whereby that reciprocity of access can now be formalised in a deed to be executed by Parliament and by this Council if it so chooses. I think the important elements of it include that there's a process required to ensure that there's no impost upon the parliamentary precinct, which would be inappropriate, and equally no impost upon council facilities, which would be inappropriate. And the recommendation, Mr Chairman, is that Council either agree to the proposition, attempt to adjust or modify it, or not accept it, bearing in mind that Council can at any time in the future opt out if it wishes.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Any questions from the floor in relation to that report? Somebody move that the CEO's report be adopted. Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in...
Through you, Mr Chairman, does Council wish to opt into the mutual access agreement?
I understood it was opt-in.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr Chairman.
All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 5.4, the Remuneration Tribunal report, and Mr CEO will present this report.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the the Remuneration Tribunal has provided its report in respect of council's remuneration or councillors' remuneration. The recommendation by the tribunal is that the remuneration levels for mayors, deputy mayors and councillors be increased by 2% from 1st of July of this year. The council has the capacity to either resolve to accept a 2% increase, to resolve to accept a lesser amount, or make no resolution whatsoever. However, if the council does not resolve in respect of this matter, the 2% remuneration increase would naturally flow, absent of resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Any questions of the officer on regard to this issue? If not, I'd like to move the following. I note that the recommendation from the Corporate Governance Officer, as supported by the CEO, does not attempt to sway council either way in regard to the acceptance or otherwise of the recommended 2% increase to councillors' remuneration. I think it is quite right that the staff have not attempted to influence this very important financial and leadership decision. As I understand the legislation, if council were to do nothing, then the increase would naturally be applied, and I believe this would be irresponsible given the environment around COVID-19. I say that this council must transparently determine whether or not to accept the increase in the full light of public scrutiny. I therefore move that council resolve to accept no increase as recommended by the Remuneration Tribunal, and that the CEO be instructed to advise the Tribunal accordingly. I call for a seconder, please. Seconded by Councillor Barnes. Any further comment, councillors? Please show your support. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We move on to item 5.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to speak over you. May I have your permission to make some further comments in respect of that?
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, the members of the executive management team in recent times have dealt with a pandemic. They've dealt with the preparation towards what will be an extraordinary budget, a very rigorous budget. They've operated within a period of what now is officially a recession, and they've responded to the impact of the recent organisational restructure, which has added to their responsibilities by way of volume and by way of complexity. They've done all this without complaint, Mr. Chairman, and I'm proud to acknowledge the efforts that they've made, and I salute them. Mr. Chairman, the members of the executive management team have also authorised me to provide to council that no member of the executive management team will seek or accept an increase in salary during the 2020-2021 period, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I think that's a great acknowledgement of the environment our staff have operated in over recent times. Some criticism about restrictions that have been put in place, but the evidence is there. We've had 2 positive cases in Cassowary Coast. Those 2 people went into immediate quarantine. We've had no more issues to be concerned about in terms of positive cases, but in terms of the workload our staff have endured, it's gone from the pandemic committee duties to what you'd said before about the restructure and the extra work that has been loaded onto people's shoulders in that regard. So we really support the effort that's been put in by our staff, and we really acknowledge their wonderful contribution they've made thus far, and we publicly acknowledge their commitment to not seeking any salary increase in the next 12 months, in line with what the councillors have just adopted.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the team.
Hear, hear.
All right, we'll move on to item 5.5, the councillors' external representations 2020 to 24. Over to the CEO.
Microphone, please.
I do beg your pardon. Thank you, Mr Chairman. The report deals with the list of councillor external representations. It's quite an extensive list. Can we take it as read, Mr Chairman, or would you prefer me to read it into the record?
I wouldn't mind you reading it into the record, so
It'd be my pleasure. Yep.
The people that are viewing via live streaming have a full understanding of the workload that 7 councillors are carrying currently with the COVID-19 issue and normal core duties of a councillor day to day.
Quite so, thank you, Mr Chairman. Pleasure to do it. The Australian Sugar Industry Museum Board, Councillor Farinelli. Cairns and Hinterland Health Service Community Action Group, Councillor Millwood, with an alternative representative, Councillor Chewy. Cassowary Coast Marine Advisory Committee, Councillor Chewy. Cassowary Coast Natural Asset Management Advisory Committee, Councillor Barnes, with an alternative of Councillor Millwood. Cassowary Coast River Improvement Trust, Councillor Baines, with a second of Councillor Pervin. Community Engagement Panel Group, Councillor Farinelli, with a second as Councillor Pervin. The Conservatorium Management Committee, yourself, Mr Chairman, with Councillor Pervin as a second. The District Disaster Management Group, again yourself, Mr Chairman, with Councillor Barnes as a second. The Far North Queensland Regional Organisation of Councils, again yourself, Mr Chairman, with Councillor Baines as second. The Far North Queensland Regional Roads Group, again yourself, Mr Chairman, with Councillor Baines as a second. The Hinchinbrook Local Marine Advisory Committee, Councillor Barnes. The Innisfail Aerodrome Management Committee, Councillors Pervin and Farinelli, with a second of Councillor Baines. The Innisfail Combined Sports Association Incorporated, Councillor Pervin. The Innisfail and District Liquor Accord, Councillor Baines, with a second of Councillor Pervin. Johnson River Catchment Management Association, Councillor Baines, with a second of Councillor Chewy. The LAWMAC, the Local Authority Waste Management Authority, Councillors Chewy and Millwood. The Marillion Port Advisory Group, Councillor Farinelli, with a second in Councillor Pervin. The Mundu Airport Committee, Councillors Pervin and Councillors Farinelli. The Tropical Coast Tourism Board and the Tourism Committee, in both cases Councillor Farinelli, with a second as Councillor Chewy. The Tropical Art Deco Society, Councillor Chewy, with a second in Councillor Pervin. The Tully 4854 Group, Councillor Millwood, with a second in Councillor Chewy. The Panama TR4 Regional Working Group, Councillor Baines, with a second, Councillor Pervin. The Peace Park Management Committee, Councillor Farinelli, with a second in Councillor Pervin. The Reef Guardian Council Steering Committee, Councillor Chewy, with a second in Councillor Baines. The Tully Multipurpose Centre Management Committee, Councillor Barnes, with a second in Councillor Chewy. The Tully Police and Community Consultative Committee, Councillor Millwood, with a second in Councillor Chewy. The Tully Support Service Incorporated, Councillor Millwood, with a second in Councillor Chewy. Is the full report, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Business as usual with the vast majority of those committees, but I do want to highlight one new committee, the Community Engagement Panel. Councillor Farinelli has been chosen to chair that committee. That group are going to have a vital role in the budget and post the budget. This council has recognised that we're top heavy with our assets, and we've got a policy now to retire stranded assets. And we won't do it as 7 councillors and staff. We're going to engage the community through the 26 volunteers who've put up expressions of interest to sit on that panel. And as we go forward, we're going to make sure the community sentiment is taken on board by the 7 people that vote on it and have their input all the way through. So I think it's a vital committee. It's all about looking at council assets and how we can take stranded assets off our books, because our depreciation bill is skyrocketing. The Queensland Treasury have highlighted that to us. Currently our asset value base per rateable property sits at $73,000 compared to our neighbours who we always get compared with when they're talking about high rates and low rates. Tableland is $46,000 rateable property versus asset value, and Hinchinbrook is $43,000 asset value versus rateable property. So we're double our neighbours, and we've seen that as a challenge. COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to make those changes and those cuts, and the council have put their hand up to take that task on board. And I applaud the council for supporting that. It takes political will to retire assets, but we're not going to do it alone. The new committee, the Community Engagement Panel, are going to play a vital role. 26 ratepayers are going to have a huge input into that process. So watch this space. In the next 4 years, we are going to cut the cloth and we're going to cut the fat, and we're going to try and reduce that asset base, because the ratepayer base cannot sustain what we're currently servicing. Simple as that. And that's not me talking, that's Queensland Treasury. They've said it years ago, and nobody's had the political will to tackle it. Well, COVID-19 has forced us to make change. Look outside the square, and good luck, Councillor Farinelli, in those endeavours. Okay, any questions for Mr. Gott? Councillor Farinelli.
I think I'm up for the challenge, Mr. Mayor.
That's why we chose you, Councillor Farinelli. No further questions, councillors? Okay, we'll move on to item 6, asset sustainability.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
I so moved. Councillor Barnes. Seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Asset sustainability 6.1, and I hand over to Mr. Smart to present his report.
Morning, councillors.
Mr. Smart.
This report is just an update of progress at the Bulgan Intake Reservoir. The reservoir is one of our key assets to improve water quality for the Tully region. I'm pleased to inform you that the reservoir walls are well underway. You can see from the photos attached in the report that there's about 4 panels being constructed of the walls. The wet weather this week has slowed things somewhat, but yeah, we are moving ahead very quickly now, and the scheduled date for completion of the reservoir is still the end of August. There will be some commissioning that will take the completion date at this point out to mid-September. So unfortunately we will probably miss the wet season this year, but the contractor is working as quickly as he can given the constraints of the site. As noted in previous reports, the site has had a lot of issues with significant boulders, and we've also had wet weather delays as well. Expenditure is ticking along quite nicely. We're basically expended about 2/3 of the budget. I have forecast in the 2021 budget that I will be needing additional funds to improve the access road, which has been torn up fairly badly by the construction works. But other than that, things are moving along well.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair. Mr. Smart, how are you today?
Good, thank you.
I just wanted to, on the aim on the completion of the Bulgan Reservoir is to reduce the boil water alerts substantially in the area?
Yes, that's right. The operation of the reservoir, we have turbidity analyzers upstream of the reservoir. When those turbidity analyzers register, I guess, dirty water coming through the intake, we will shut upstream of the reservoir and supply the community from the storage in that new reservoir. And we've also got the Wheatley's Hill, which will supplement the Mission Beach region as well.
Any further questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move that the report be adopted, please? Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.2, Tully Multi-Purpose Centre Sporting Complex, and I hand over to Justin Fisher, our Asset Manager. Morning, Justin.
Morning, Council. Through the Chair, Councillors, this is a monthly update on the Tully Multi-Use Sporting Complex and Grandstand project. Project is really starting to take shape and tracking quite well now. We've got our roof up. Interior fit-out's well progressing. The plasterers have been in, and we've now got gyprock within most of the interior rooms that are going to be lined, and a fair bit of floor covering has been installed on the lower levels. Most of the equipment we need to finish the job is now on site as well, and the work surrounding the drainage works at the back have also commenced. You'll note in the report there that the current, in terms of future milestones, the contractual practical completion dates still listed as the 13th of July. I've got an error down there on the future milestones. That's the 13th of July in that next page. We've also, our superintendent's is assessing an extension of time request. It's not a big request, and anticipate that might only add a week or so to the project. So still on track for a July, mid-July to late July finish, which I think is still a credit to the contractor given the weather we've had late in the year, but also the other constraints going on in our community. So this month in June we'll be installing the balustrading, which is all the handrails around the grandstand. The ceiling work on the main roof has already commenced, so that'll really add to the finish of the building. The scaffolding is currently being removed, so you can really start to see the shape of the building, and the rear concrete stairs are another major part that will be finished this month. So a couple pictures there to demonstrate the progress. And another good thing is we've had another tour with the user groups, the larger of the 20 groups. Number of those people have now been through the site, and all very positive feedback. So, and I'd just again like to thank those groups for their continued support of the project. Happy to take any questions through the Chair.
Councillors, any questions? Councillor Millwood.
Through the Chair. Justin, where are they up to with the naming of the building?
I'll defer that to Mr. Goodman to answer that question. Thank you.
Just through the Chair, just hang on, Mr. Fisher, there might be other questions for you. Councillors, I will need to progress a meeting with to follow a resolution of the previous council. I'll need to work with, well, the resolution says the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and the Division 2 councillor to progress that matter. So we actually had tried to organise a meeting in last week, but it conflicted with some additional budgetary meetings, so we will get on and progress that in the very near future.
Any further questions for Mr. Fisher? Councillor Chewy.
Not a question, just well done, and it looks fantastic, and I'm sure Tully and the community can't wait to use it. So thank you to everybody involved.
Any further questions for Mr. Fisher? Just a comment in relation to the unveiling and the opening of this wonderful facility. Is there any activity planned in front of the grandstand to entertain the crowd on the day? I've heard about a football match being planned. What about the synonymous thing with Tully, throwing the gumboot? I reckon that'd be a good activity. Have the crowd sitting there having a beverage and watching Bob Catter and Shane Knuth throw the gumboot. In lieu of a football match, it is Tully through and through. That's their core business. So I'll leave that with the officers, but I don't think just unveiling it on its own. Should have some activity on the field as well, so the audience can view from the grandstand.
Through the chair, I'm happy to provide some feedback on that. We are already getting a lot of suggestions from the user groups, and certainly an opening is not much of an opening if we are restricted and there's only 100 people or something like that. So we will have to. We don't have to, but I would suggest that a formal opening be deferred until such time that we actually can have a decent crowd in attendance. But we are getting a lot of suggestions from the user groups and potentially some, certainly from the Senior League have suggested an out-of-season special one-off game there, plus there are plenty of other suggestions too, but happy to include the gumboot throwing in as perhaps a half-time entertainment or something like that. That would be great.
The local councillor, Mr Councillor Millwall and Barnes are going to put up prize money for that event, and I think we should take that offer on board and make sure we organise it.
Can we just make, excuse me, Mr Mayor, it's through you, can we add the Mayor to Mr Knuth and Mr Catter as a thrower of the gumboot as well, please?
Absolutely, I'm up for that challenge. As long as the federal member and the state member are lined up, I'm happy to be there to have a throw, for sure. Thank you, Councillor Chewy.
Through the chair, as Division 2 councillor, I will also provide a trophy for the day for that event. Thank you.
Well, now the discussion's gone down this path, I think there should be a male and female title, and I'll put up a trophy for the best female thrower on the day. Are you happy to accept that challenge? Sure. Okay.
And I'll start through you again, Mr Chair. I would absolutely support you in that, to be inclusive and have all the members of the council possibly involved in this process. And whether you need a separate trophy or not, well, girls can do anything. I've got the sticker sitting on the wall at home.
Absolutely. It's on the side of my fridge as well, Councillor Baines. Okay, any questions further for Mr Fisher? If not, we'll move on to the next item. We voted on that, did we? No? Somebody moved that the officer's report be accepted. Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Item 6.3, Infrastructure Services Report. Mr Goodman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, we have managed to catch up with the last two meetings, and I can now present to you the May capital report for infrastructure services in a time that we would normally present it. Unfortunately, I can't present to you a huge list of achievements for the month of May. Our works have been significantly impacted by a particularly wet May. Of interest, just to demonstrate how wet it was, looking at the Bureau of Meteorology's website, Bingle Bay recorded 301 millimetres on one day during May, which is a record for Bingle Bay. Also for Bingle Bay, it was the highest May rainfall on record. So just gives some idea of the out-of-season rainfall during May. That being said, I would say largely due to the good work that was done earlier in the financial year, we still, including committals, sit at around 88% of the program delivered or committed prior to at the end of May. There's about 150 odd projects listed in the report, so I don't intend on going through them in detail, but happy to take any questions on individual projects.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Any questions from the floor? If not, would somebody move the officer's report be adopted? Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move on to planning. Item 7.1, application for the reduction of infrastructure charges. And Dylan Thomas will deliver this report. Morning, Dylan.
Through the Chair, the reduction in infrastructure charges scheme was introduced from the 16th of December 2019 as per a council resolution. The aim of this policy was to encourage development that achieves certain strategic objectives for the Cassowary Coast by allowing a reduction in the infrastructure charges payable of up to 100% in relation to certain types of development that are completed within 3 years of the date of the approval taking effect. On the 14th of May 2020, Council approved a material change of use for offices and shops subject to conditions situated at 2 Reef Street, Wongaling Beach. Council levies infrastructure charges on certain development approvals as per the Cassowary Coast Infrastructure Charges Resolution. This development approval attracted infrastructure charges equal to $16,017.09. As per page 328, Council is now in receipt of an application for a reduction in infrastructure charges relating to this development approval. To be eligible for the incentives under this policy, the site is required to be serviced by both trunk, water and sewerage infrastructure networks, be capable of being completed within 3 years of the development approval taking place, provide capital investment in accordance with the planning scheme, and generate growth and new opportunities for investment in the region. The proposed development of offices and shops meets the criteria for eligible development outlined within this policy. The proposed development will be complementary and contribute positively to the Greater Mission Beach local plan area. The development has demonstrated that it will provide economic benefits to the Cassowary Coast region and its residents through employment of locals and by establishing additional commercial development to the region that contributes to the diversification of the local economy. The site is also connected to existing water and sewage infrastructure. As a result of the development meeting the required criteria of Council's Activate Cassowary Coast Development Incentive Reduction in Infrastructure Charges Scheme, it is recommended that the request for 100% reduction in infrastructure charges be approved by Council, provided the development is completed, all work is completed in accordance with the requirements of the decision notice issued for the development prior to the 15th of May 2023. Happy to answer any questions Council may have.
Councillors, any questions for Mr Thomas? If there's no question, would somebody move the officer's recommendation? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Purban. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to item 7.2, delegation report. Mr Horton. Morning, Dan.
Morning, Mr Mayor. Morning, Council.
Not on, mate.
Hope everyone's well.
Mr Horton.
Hope everyone's well out there as well. So, this morning, Council, page 332 of our reports is the delegation report. You'll see the delegation report's a little bit different this week than it has been before. I removed some of the components which I'll hopefully provide to Council moving forward, and as per our presentation yesterday, you'll be able to gain that information through our My Council website. The delegations report is pretty straightforward, Council. In our planning matters on page 334, we're just tracking just under last year over the financial year. However, we've had an influx of applications come in the last week or so, so I'm feeling positive that we'll reach that target of last year for that Council. So the dwellings were down a little bit this month, more or less related to March, and May's pretty much in line with that, with 3 dwellings being the total for the month that has been approved. Overall, we had 24 approvals in building, 1.25 million in the overall payments of costs. So at the current time, we're tracking dwellings approved over this current calendar year at $5.9 million of worth of dwellings and $10.9 million worth of total work. The overall progressive totals for dwellings is 27 so far for the calendar year and 153 for all approvals. Council, I'll take you to page 343, which looks at the monthly comparison for all approvals that we currently have. For May, we're tracking just above last year with 153 to 144, which I think in the current climate's not too bad myself, Mr Mayor. With that, with our progressive totals in dwellings on the next page, we're just a bit below last year, but hopefully once we hit a bit more fine weather, we'll probably see a bit more movement within that area. So I suppose for the main ones for me, Council, is the overall totals for the financial year, which is on the page 352. which looks at last year. We overall approved in building 367 applications to date. In May, we've approved 393 applications to date. So we're still tracking fairly well in that area. We're well in front of last year over the financial. Bit of costs there, a little bit down with the money value on some of those applications. However, all in all, Council, I think we're still tracking in the right direction. There's still some building activity moving along around the area. So I'm happy to answer any questions, Council.
Council, is any questions for Mr Horton? I have one, Mr Horton. Can you give us an update about the wrecking yard in South Innisfail in relation to the show cause that you served on that property recently?
Through the Chair, Mr Mayor, at the current time we're working with the owner. We've asked for an application to be lodged at the current time. That's just through a letter process at the current time. He's currently engaged a consultant to deal with that matter. So moving forward, we'll be working with that consultant, and if an application is lodged, we'll deal with that in the appropriate manner.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Mr Horton? Moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Put your hand up, Councillor Chewy. Unanimous, thank you. Okay, that's the end of the listed. That's the end of the listed items, and now we move into general business. Any general business items, councillors?
Yes, Mr Mayor, through you. I've just got for the Manager of Infrastructure, Dave. Dave, yesterday we had the State Opposition Leader and Deb Fleckwington and the Opposition Deputy Tim Mander. They came through the north and they visited Cardwell and Port Hinchinbrook and showed great interest in 1 Mile and also other issues around the north. I thought it would have been nice if they could have come and consulted this council, as we've got a lot of issues here that we'd love to speak to them about. So let's hope next time they come through that they consider us. And they were very interested in the dredging. Where are we at that stage, Dave?
Through the Chair, I provided a fairly detailed update to Council at the last meeting. The only real update that I can provide to Council at this time is that confirm that we are on track for expression of interest to go out this month. That will, so that will happen, and that expression of interest will set us up to certainly be in a good position to inform the opposition of any additional funding requirements that may be required to deliver a sustainable project at Port Hinchinbrook.
All right, yeah, thank you. Also, one other thing is I think the general public are just starting to be aware that the council, the impact that COVID's had on this council, as we're unlike a normal business, we're not eligible for the stimulus package. The only little bit of help we are going to get is from the Queensland government with the Works for Queensland. How organised are you, ready to get all those little projects online and in the time factor, Dave?
Through the Chair, we are well organised, and just to provide a little detail, there's 2.37 million been allocated to the Cassowary Coast Regional Council by the state government for a particular program, COVID Works of Queensland. Unlike other Works of Queensland, this is a 1-year program rather than a two-year program, and it comes in addition to the already Works for Queensland projects. There are some changes to this program. Of particular note is that road projects are ineligible. The three categories that we're required to submit eligible funding is in essential services, water supply, sewerage, waste, and energy and communications, economic development projects, and community wellbeing projects. I'd like to acknowledge the assistance that councillors have provided staff in putting together projects, eligible projects, and that funding application is required to be submitted by tomorrow, and we will have that certainly meet that requirement. It's ready to go today, our funding submission. I'm not proposing to go into the specific detail of the funding submission, because there is a process to go through with the department to confirm the eligibility of each of those individual projects. Although we are fairly confident that all the projects we are nominating are eligible, because we have had some discussion with departmental officers. I can give you, or I am proposed to give you just the general categories of projects that we are will be submitting. Those within the economic development category will excuse me, sit within the caravan parks and RV infrastructure upgrade and tourism infrastructure upgrade. Within community wellbeing, projects for community art in particular, well, I won't go into the details, but there's a community art project. And then within essential services, water infrastructure upgrade, stormwater infrastructure improvement, and community and facilities improvement. And we certainly have that projects ready for the full 2.37 million, and also know there's the letter drafted for the Mayor to sign, which will indicate that we have a significant other projects ready and able to be delivered that meet the guidelines of this particular funding, just in case there are other councils within Queensland that are not able to come up with the projects in time.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair. Dave, I just wondered what the update was for the leasee for the Mission Beach pool at the minute.
Through the chair, the tender has been advertised, and the tenders close on the 8th of July 2020. Once tenders close, then we can start to discuss what the details of that are. It's not really appropriate to go into any detail during this procurement phase, but yes, certainly the 8th of July 2020, and just an update, I know there was a resolution passed for a report to be provided back to Council in more general matters on the Mission Beach pool, and the facilities team have that report significantly progressed, and it will be provided to the next meeting for Council.
Councillor Pervin.
Through you, Mr Chair. Mr Goodman, any update on the Upper Darragee Road in relation to the realignment of the water main and opening to 2 lanes?
Yes, that was expected to be delivered by now. It's one of those projects that has been delayed due to wet weather. I did chase up an update from the supervisor who's organising that water main realignment yesterday. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me. He hasn't been able to provide that to me prior to today's meeting, but I'll certainly give you an update, and we will be, as soon as we have that, we'll also provide a community update through our email letter that we put out to those interested parties.
Any further questions for Mr Goodman? Thank you. Any further general business items? I just want to make a general comment, mainly for the people viewing via live streaming. A new initiative of this council is that we are now going division by division to listen to the people, talk to the people about the issues, gathering information, photographs, etc. We kicked it off in Division 1 last week. It was a great day. Councillor Barnes put a itinerary together for us. He highlighted his priorities in Division 1. The next port of call is going to be Division 6. So we're encouraging the community to have a chat to the councillors as they walk the streets, take us to the hotspots, show us what you need assistance with, so we're fully informed as we go into future budgets and workshops on Work for Queensland, for example. So in the past, it's always been a matter of getting on a bus and touring around. The pandemic has restricted us in that regard with physical distancing. So we've decided to go another path, and that is division by division, and I think it's been a great initiative. The feedback in Cardwell was enormous. We had lunch down there. We saw everything that the divisional councillor wanted us to take on board. Mr Goodman offered technical advice on the majority of the projects. We didn't rely on the Boilermaker Barnes to give us all the information, and I'm looking forward to visits to the other divisions going forward. As I said, it's something that's been forced on us because of the virus, but I think it's been a positive change, and we're really letting the councillors set the agenda, and I think that's a big change from the past. We look forward to visiting Division 6, and I noticed that morning tea and lunch is already listed, so, and I hope we're having lunch at the Barramundi farm, is that right?
Oh, no, but we can, I'm not sure
Well,
whether they have the ability to
order in
provide
now.
lunch, but I can tell
Councillor
you there will be pies at Marillion Bakery, and we have got another cafe there in Marillion as part of the Sugar Museum complex, and I can tell you now they do some great fish chips and hamburgers. Well, see if they can do Barramundi burger for you, Mr Mayor.
And have you given the staff that we need on board a heads up so they can plan that day?
So
please?
I've put together my list of where I think we need to look at around Division 6, liaising with some of the staff to be on board, and I've had no advice from them. They're willing to come along and keep council up to date with some of the things happening in Division 6, what's happening moving forward, and just if we've got any questions, I'll have the relevant staff there to answer them, I'm hoping.
And can I say that each of the councillors acted with aplomb when we went through Cardwell. The Marina Hotel was open for business and we did not quench our thirst. There was a lot of willpower on the day. Is there any further general business, Councillor Baines?
One more item, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, as you're well aware, the community garden has celebrated its 10th birthday just recently. It is the longest running community garden within the state that's been running continually. I know we're under COVID restrictions and all sorts of issues at the moment, but I think it may be a good recovery piece and a good wellbeing piece that possibly council looks at supporting them in some way, and we have a bit of a day at the gardens once this is all opened up, and it'll give the councillors a great opportunity to have a look around the garden. There was a few discussions on it yesterday. It's a wonderful facility. Doesn't sit upon our land, but you know it's a great one. And the mayor and I have supported it for a long, long time. And I just wanted to put it on the books, Mr Mayor, that we look at supporting them and let's make a bit of a to-do out of this. It's a great spot and might be able to encourage a bit more usage of the area at the same time.
Yeah, I'd just like to support Councillor Baines' comments. I was there for the opening many years ago and I was a Deputy Mayor at the time. Continued our support up to this point. But it's more than a community garden. It's the social interaction that it offers. There are traditional owner groups, there are respite groups, there are retirees, there are school children, and they all get an opportunity to pick out a plot and grow their stuff. And much of the produce is donated to Meals on Wheels, etc. So there's a community benefit in the community garden in that sense. The social interaction, the produce that's delivered goes out to those most needy in our community, and I think that's one of the principal values of having a community garden. So thank you for raising that point, Councillor Baines.
Pleasure, Mr Chair.
Mr Sadler.
Mr Chair, can I propose that we add that to our human social recovery group as an idea to move forward with the community events that that group is planning as part of recovery of COVID-19.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Sadler. Councillors, any further general business items? If not, I'll declare the meeting closed at 10:32. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chair.